So welcome to this session is Setting the Scene. It's first chapter readings. And we all are your readers for today. So I'm going to start off with some introductions and then we'll jump right into those readings. So if you want to go ahead and give us a little wave when I call out your name, I realize that it is in your, your name is at the bottom of your picture, but always good to make sure we know who you are. So first up, we have Jessie Thoma, who has shunned the idea of finding a favorite genre to write, and instead has published everything from superheroes to contemporary romance, with a few women in uniform thrown in for good measure. Jessie lives in New England with her family. We have Santiago, who writes novels about LGBTQ plus characters of color, and non-monogamous relationships. He had the honor of having his debut novel nominated for a Lambda Literary Award. When he's not writing, he works full-time as an economist. He lives in Florida with his family and pets. His pronouns are he, him, and the book he will be reading from is Head Over Heel Flip. Tagan Shepard, she, her, is an award-winning author of women-loving women fiction. She has published 10 novels, including her most recent, Pumpkin Spice. Her work has ranged from contemporary romance to science fiction to action, but all of her work has one thing in common. It centers around extraordinary women falling in love with extraordinary women. Tagan is an avid reader, a cat lover, and a gamer. She also loves cheese and wine, bread, pizza, French pastries. Look, if it has too many calories and doctors say you should limit your intake, she's a fan. Karis Walsh is the author of 15 contemporary lesbian romances, as well as 2 romantic intrigue series. Her stories are set in some of her favorite places in the Pacific Northwest and often include her passions of music, animals, and academia. She works as an office manager and horseback riding instructor and spends her free time reading, playing the viola, and taking care of her animals. Her book is A Degree to Die For, which is the second in her University Police series. And I am your moderator, Jennifer Karter. I've lived in Minnesota for all of 6 months now and enjoy juggling international development work, a passion for intricate world building, and exploring the world with my 2-year-old. I'm a longtime avid dungeon master, but only ever of Dungeons and Dragons, and love playing board games, of which I own over 300. I write world-building fantasy novels about powerful women falling in love with each other, of course. And my newest book is Of Auras and Shadows, which came out this month. All right, let's go ahead and jump into those readings. I'll ask all of the authors who are not reading to go ahead and turn off your video so that and mute yourself so we can focus on our reader. But first up, we have Jessie.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm reading from Guide Us Home, which came out, is coming out, sorry, in February, and I co-wrote with C.S. Frizzell. It's a part contemporary romance, which is the section that I wrote, and part historical romance, which is what Frizz wrote. So definitely check that out when it comes out. And shock and surprise, I am going to be reading from the first chapter. Our 2 main characters are Nancy and Sam, and this is going to be the first time that they meet. The boat rocked precariously under Samantha McMahon's foot as she stepped on board. She lurched her way to an open seat close to the back. "Did you stumble onto the wrong boat?" A woman with fiery red hair and an amused look on her face gave Sam a casual once-over. "This one's heading to the lighthouse." Before Sam could answer, the captain pulled away from the dock. Her stomach immediately reconsidered breakfast. She took a few deep breaths. "I'm going to the lighthouse, too," Sam managed to gasp between waves of nausea. She rested her elbows on her knees and cradled her head. The redhead leaned forward so Sam could see her face. "My family says I'm too blunt, and I don't mean to be rude, but what made you want to buy a lighthouse? You don't look like you've ever been on a boat before. You clearly don't have the stomach." Sam grunted. She didn't have to share her reasons with the competition. Sam's stomach steadied enough that she risked looking up at the woman criticizing her. Her breath hitched. She'd never seen eyes the color of emeralds. They were stunning. If only the woman they belonged to didn't look so thoroughly unimpressed with her. I'm Nancy Calhoun. She extended her hand. Sam was reticent to unbalance the equilibrium she and her stomach had achieved, but it was rude not to take the offered hand. Samantha McMahon. Nancy's eyebrows shot up, but she didn't say anything at the mention of Sam's well-known last name. Don't feel bad about puking if you need to. You won't be the first, and there aren't any paparazzi here. The motion doesn't bother you? Sam breathed deeply and looked over Nancy's shoulder as the boat pulled alongside the island's small, well-worn wooden dock. Practically born on the water. Haven't had it make my stomach dance yet. With that, Nancy winked and hopped gracefully onto dry land. Sam followed with much less grace and slowly climbed the steep stairs to her prize. Once up and on level ground, Sam took a moment to soak in the view. Beautiful, isn't it? Nancy indicated all around. I see a lot that I find beautiful. Sam didn't bother with the scenery anymore. A lighthouse didn't need to be the only thing she captured on this trip. Nancy rolled her eyes. Oh, please. If you want a Samantha McMahon woman, I'm sure you'll have plenty of takers, but it's not going to be me. I'll save you the trouble now. I'm here for one reason, and it's not you. No offense. Sam took a step back. I'm here for the same purpose you are. I apologize for implying you're beautiful. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. Nancy fixed her with a stare. You can imply whatever you like. You wouldn't be the first, but a compliment with an agenda is hardly a compliment, She started off away from Sam before stopping and turning back. Do you know what that building is? She pointed to a long, low building shaped like a Swiss roll. Sam considered the building carefully, then walked over for a closer look. No idea what it was, but can you imagine this place as a pub? It's perfect. The design materialized before Sam's eyes. A pub? Nancy's voice pitched higher, the annoyance unmistakable. You don't care about the remarkable history of this building at all. Your plan is to spit on it and build a bar? Yes. Sam felt a small pang of guilt when confronted with Nancy's crossed arms and frown. But I'd put up a plaque, of course. Of course you would. Nancy frowned more deeply. Why do you want this lighthouse? You live across the country, you clearly don't care about the history, and you get seasick easily. Given how well her pub idea had landed, Sam wasn't eager to share the rest of her vision for the island. Why do you want the lighthouse? Nancy's expression softened and she relaxed her posture. This lighthouse is part of Rhode Island's history. Sam nodded, and I believe it can be part of its future. I guess that's why we have the proposal process. While you were trying not to puke on the boat, I counted 4 other bidders. One of them wants to turn the entire island into a dance club. Nancy shuddered. And now my bar idea isn't looking so bad, right? Sam raised an eyebrow. I can't imagine what would happen to the lighthouse itself if this all became a dance club. Nancy scrunched her nose, clearly disgusted. Wouldn't be hard to transform the light into a disco ball. Sam barely kept a straight face. Nancy laughed. Even if you're funny, don't expect me to like you. Sam shook her head. I should hope not. Nancy searched Sam's face longer than Sam was comfortable with. When you said your proposal made the lighthouse part of Rhode Island's future, whose future did you mean? Would everyone get to take part? Sam hesitated. If this becomes a business venture, then yes, it would be open to the public. If it becomes a business venture, as opposed to what? Private venture? Nancy's eyes widened. You're trying to buy this lighthouse and the rest of the island so you can fly across the country to your personal playground and have drinks in there, as opposed to literally any other bar, pub, or fancy club anywhere in the world? Don't you already have enough? What about the rest of us? Sam held up her hands in the universal sign of surrender. If we agreed about our proposals, we would have teamed up. Let me guess, you're hoping to turn this place into an out-of-the-way, inconvenient museum no one will ever visit? The metaphorical Alcatraz for history? Nancy practically growled, confirming Sam's guess. Sam started over. We clearly got off on the wrong foot. Let me buy you dinner. We won't talk about lighthouses or either of our proposals. I won't ask you any personal questions, and you can choose to ignore who I am, too. Nancy shook her head. Her green eyes had lost some of the earlier softness when they'd been teasing each other. I told you already, if you want to go full rich girl playgirl, you do you, but it's not going to happen with me. We're competitors, and I don't swoon at the kind of things you offer your dates. Sam huffed. It took a work to keep her face neutral. You don't know anything about what I offer. Nancy shrugged, unapologetic. You're on the cover of nearly every gossip magazine, at every checkout in the supermarket. How could I not know you? And even if I wanted to believe that they'd gotten you wrong, you've done nothing here to sway my opinion. Good luck with your proposal. I hope you come visit my museum when it opens. She turned and walked quickly toward the lighthouse. I'll comp you a room the first night I open my luxury resort out here. I'll fly you out on my helicopter. You can have drinks in the pub. Somehow Sam managed not to stick her tongue out at Nancy's retreating form. She followed Nancy and joined the other bidders in the lighthouse. She looked around the room at the people here to prepare proposals, same as she was. Even though it wasn't a straight bidding process, Sam had deep pockets, the right last name, and a great proposal. It felt too easy. She always held the winning hand.
Awesome. Thank you. So much to love there. I like how we get to know both characters already. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to hand it next to Sander.
So I will be reading today from Head Over Heel Flip. It is a contemporary romance about skateboarders, BMX bikers, and rollerbladers competing in a competition. So again, I'll be reading from the first chapter, and I want to warn everyone in advance, this has some swearing in it. So you've been warned. So for the skateboard tournament, the major continued, their hands hovered over their plate as if they were about to perform magic on their tacos. I tuned them out in favor of thinking about the prizes. Those prizes were half my social media plan for a cast, since the fans loved them. So I wasn't about to give them up. The one that was speaking to me at the moment was Make a Spectacle at an event. That one had been sponsored by a group from the Denver Center for the Performing Arts. I could make a spectacle to a big audience if I used our platforms properly. But what could we do? There were rules about getting naked or bleeding, but what else did people turn out in droves for? A funeral? I thought unhelpfully. What about a wedding? I offered, the words exiting my mouth without my brain saying it was okay. For a moment, even I was wondering where that came from. The table was quiet and staring at me. Where was I going with this? I opened my mouth and an idea came out. I mean, weddings are the OG spectacle, so that takes care of one of the prizes. Then there was another one from lawyers. What was it? Sign a contract, Pirate said. The fuck are you talking about? The major asked. It's a plan for the big points, Mage. Think about it. There's a psychological component to any competition, right? And I think we can psych out some of our competitors by eliminating two major prizes, like make a spectacle at an event and sign a contract. They'd have to scramble to keep up. That's wild, Rocky said. Does a marriage license mean a contract? The major asked. On the other hand, Rocky said, I love weddings. There are other contracts, Pirate said. The major laughed. There are a billion easier things to do. Rent a car, buy a warranty on my TV. Hell, I could accept the terms for the apps on my phone I choose to ignore. That shit is boring, Rocky said. I laughed. Thank you, Rock. See, a spectacle. Besides, marriage is also inarguably binding. Our cousin's son had 300 people at her wedding in May, Rocky said. I can get 30 times that many. I can already tell there's no talking you out of this, Pirate said. It could work. 30,000? How? The major wondered, practical as ever. Okay, maybe not 30, but if we did it on Saturday, that's at least 3,000. It'll work, I announced, deciding right then and there. Who's going to do it? The major asked. Do what? Nads came back to the table a little bit more stressed looking than before. Uno wants us to get married at the opening event on Saturday, Rocky said. Nads looked around the table and blinked, like he suddenly didn't speak the language. Run that by me again? I laughed. It's for the two sponsored prizes worth 10,000 each. You have to be fucking joking. We can't do that. Why not? Pirate said. Nads glared at him. It's just, who the fuck gets married for a competition? It was our turn to stare, since we all knew Nads watched reality TV competition shows that explicitly involved just that. There was a tense, silent moment. Nads glared at the major, who was looking at him unblinkingly. Rocky was diligently opening and pouring chili packets onto his unrolled, mangled burrito. I don't even know where he got the packets from, since there were only shakers on the table. Pirate watched Nads suspiciously. Well, less about weddings and more about the show, I said. Who's going to do it? The major asked. I'd do it, I said, but I didn't say it alone. I looked at Pirate, and he looked at me. Fuck, we said that at the same time. You'd marry me? Pirate asked, his tone impossibly flat. I almost didn't hear him over the sound of blood in my ears. I was getting excited now. His offer was the last piece that snapped all the others into place in my mind. This could work. Also, there was a new kind of feeling too. A jitter? What was that about? Maybe it was Pirate. He was always there to back me up. I loved that about him. He was so cautious sometimes. I mean, he was one of the only skateboarders to wear a helmet during the competition. But he was also my best friend and supported my antics. Or at least he made sure I knew what I was getting into. Besides, he was so cool, it was like getting a popular kid's vote. The idea of marrying him as part of this plan gave me the same feeling I used to get when a friend was allowed to sleep over at my house. It was awesome. You don't have a ring, but yes, I said, tossing in a wink. You really think this could work? The major said, the hope that it would in their voice. We don't even have a sixth teammate, Nads shouted. It's foolproof, I said. Everyone was skeptical of that. Okay, I can make it foolproof. Mage, I guarantee not only will this plan get us in the lead, but it will have the other competitors so mad they'll want to quit on the spot. This isn't even the most I would do to win. I swear I want to win this. Fuck yes, the major said. Uno, you're stupid, Nad sighed. I want to be the best man. Man's? Best man, Rocky said. If you fuck with the opening ceremony, the competition guys are going to get pissed, Nad said. Do you have to poop on everything? For a second, he actually looked insulted. Then he took a breath, and his explanation was civil enough. Uno, I just want to win. Don't do anything that will get us fucking kicked out of this. We won't get kicked out. People are going to be foaming at the mouth. It'll be one community boner. I laughed and took a few bites of my now cold burrito. While the others argued, Pyron and I stared at each other. He shrugged as if saying, I could do worse. And I laughed, trying to tell him, without telling him, he couldn't do better. He smiled. All right, Uno, tell us the plan, the major said. Meta, here's what we're going to do. I said with my mouth still full of food. By Saturday, our team will have two of the biggest prizes on the list within 10 minutes of the start of competition.
What a great setup. I love that. And I love how relatable. The one thing that stuck with me was, well, of many, was the I don't even read my phone app terms of service. I love that. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and go next. And I'm kind of going to cheat because I'm going to read two shorter sections, but they're both from the first chapter. The first one is going to be a description of the Dark Lands. And this is my book here of Auras and Shadows that I'm reading from. The Dark Lands is the land of monsters that surround the dome, protecting the community. So heroes and guardians go out into the Darklands in pairs to find the goddess's blood, which is called Ichor, and it restores the dome, right? The thing that's protecting the community. So I'm going to read that description, and then I'll jump forward to where one of our main characters, Aaron, has gone from having everything, a prophecy to save the community, an incredibly powerful guardian by her side, to being attacked and having her guardian screaming, flailing, and otherwise incapacitated on the ground. So here we go. The golden glow of the dome began to fade immediately, giving way to the appearance of constant late dusk. There was no light source above them like in the dome. Instead, the dim light seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, giving everything a surreal and uniform muted grayness. The underside of things were equally as light as the top sides. The Dark Lands were a place of emotional and moral darkness, filled with monsters and dark gods. The appearance itself was one in which there was neither light nor darkness, but a constant state in between. The leafless trees were scattered across the terrain with branches that looked like roots, gnarled and reaching out rather than up. There was no sun to provide them with nourishment. Instead, their twisted trunks expanded and contracted to breathe the air and capture small insects. To grow, the trees needed larger sustenance. When opportunity struck, a tree's branches would whip out, snag a passing creature, shove it in its untwisting trunk, and consume the creature. Luckily for Erin and her compatriots, trees didn't like competition and grew far enough apart to allow humans to avoid their areas of threat. As Erin looked across the landscape, a flat land of mixed flora providing precarious lowlands before the rise of the mountains, she was struck once again by the disconcerting dissonance before her. All the flora moved as if touched by a gentle breeze. However, all shifted in conflicting directions. There was no wind within the dark lands. Instead, every living thing moved of its own accord, reaching for its next prey. Heroes were taught how to identify and avoid corrosive moss that could eat through even a guardian's ichor-infused metal boots, and how to pass through the tufts of razor-sharp bladed grass without losing a foot. It was out further, where the mountains began, that the true danger lay. Skipping forward. No one told me what to do. She sounded pitiful to her own ears. I'm the best, I'll improvise. So she hadn't been prepared for this exact situation. She would start the way she always did, with the facts. Aaron did not know what was wrong with Strana and could do nothing to help her here. Strana's screams would have alerted all the monsters nearby, so they weren't safe here anyway. Strana was clearly not planning to get up and walk back, so Aaron would have to carry her. One look at Strana's large, flailing form dismissed that plan. I'll have to drag her. Aaron grabbed Strana's pauldron with one hand and shoulder of her gamison with the other and pulled. Strana slid a couple of inches before the back of her flailing hand slammed into the side of Aaron's head, sending her toppling sideways. Aaron clambered up, grabbed on again, and pulled, earning another several inches. Aaron dragged, trying to time her pulls with Strana's convulsions to turn inches into feet. She was just getting the hang of it when a tweeting sound broke her concentration. Aaron could just make out a small brown creature perched in the presumably dead tree off to her right. Chick dead, dead, dead. It was joined by a companion, whose movement separated it from the dense brambles of the branches. Chick dead, dead, dead. Then another and another. The cacophony grew until they were at the center of a discordant maelstrom screeching, dead, 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 with an almost sickly sweetness of chickas underneath. There was a smell of rot in the air, as if the sweetness of their call had gone rancid within the creatures and was escaping with each screech. Aaron had no idea how long they'd been watching her, or how many had amassed while she was attempting to drag Strana. All she knew was that they were about to become a swarm. Chickadreads, Aaron swore. Individually, they posed almost no threat, besides a few fetid cuts, but Strana's screams had drawn so many, in addition to other monsters that might be waiting in the underbrush, to see how the fight went and pick off the winner for scraps of a loser. Aaron pulled harder and faster. There was no use in waiting for them to attack. It was inevitable, so she might as well get Strana as far as she could before the swarm descended. The movement started with a single chickadred, a wing flap that gave the whole tree the appearance of a second life. As one creature, the chickadred swooped down on Aaron and Strana, still screeching, dead, dead, dead! Aaron waited until the last moment to drop Strana, draw her sword, and slice up through a chickadred. She cut another in two as three clipped her face, leaving shallow, stinging cuts in their wake. She pushed down the bile that rose at the smell engulfing her head with putrescence. A dozen tore her gamison, while a half-dozen more struck Strana, leaving yet more gashes. Twice as many as struck simply shot by, unable to find a gap for attack. Aaron cut three more from the sky before the swarm was above them, swirling as it turned for another run. And that's my piece. So with that, I will hand it to Tagan for the next reading.
Thanks so much. So I'll be reading from my October release, Pumpkin Spice. In this first chapter, we mainly spend time with our main character, Nikki. You can do this. It's just like riding a bike, right? You never really forget how, no matter how long it's been. I raised the axe and the setting sun glinted off the gleaming edge, just like riding a bike. It was not like riding a bike. I swung the axe, suppressing the urge to roar like Xena smiting my enemies. I missed. The wedge of dried pine wobbled, then plopped unceremoniously to the earth. I sighed for what felt like the 100th time and slumped against my axe handle. This is hopeless. Somehow, this task had been a lot easier when I was a teenager helping my dad. When I was 16, I could cut a whole winter's worth of firewood in a single afternoon and still do all my homework on time. Okay, maybe not a whole winter's worth, but pretty close. And the homework part was totally true. I was about to ask myself what exactly happened in the last 24 years to make me worthless with physical tasks like this, but bending down to pick up the still too big wedge of firewood made my knees ache, so I didn't have the energy. After examining the stubborn chunk of wood, I decided it would still burn despite its massive size, and carried it to the wood shelter behind my cottage. The sweat I had worked up chopping, or attempting to chop, wood cooled on my skin. September had started off warm as summer, but chilled rapidly. It was that threat that had me out here in the limited daylight after work, desperately trying to stock enough firewood. The sun was significantly lower in the sky when I made it back to my firewood chopping setup, and it was dropping fast. I didn't have much time, but I had to give it another go. I grumbled as I reached for the axe. A good lesbian would be able to chop mountains of firewood. A familiar laugh rang out across the yard, and I turned to see my sister Rachel walking toward me, a pair of wine glasses in her hands. Truer words were never spoken. I'm shocked your rainbow card hasn't been revoked. I stuck my tongue out at her and earned another of her musical laughs. Rachel was 2 years older than me, but was light years ahead in every other category. She was 6 inches taller and had the sort of slim in all the right places look that made her the prettiest one in every room. In contrast to my stylish sister, I looked like the sort of plain, forgettable woman generations past would have referred to as a dowdy spinster. I'd never been interested in the latest trends, plus most of the clothing I found in the stores Rachel shopped in were far too feminine for me. Thus, my wardrobe consisted mainly of blue jeans, khakis, and whatever was on sale at LL Bean. Rachel sipped her glass of wine as she teased me. You're too femme for firewood and too butch for spike heels. Once the gay authorities find out you don't fit into either lesbian type, they'll come after you for sure. Excuse me, there are more than two types of lesbian. I swiped the wine glass she held out and took a long sip. I've been trying to tell you that for years. Rachel's smile grew slowly. Maybe you should tell yourself that, then you won't beat yourself up over this. I pushed the wine glass back at her and lined up my next chop. The log teetering on the chopping block was massive, but I would conquer it. Not to retain my rainbow card, but to keep myself from freezing to death this winter. I did not conquer it. The axe struck home in the dead center of the log, but it wedged itself about an inch deep and stopped. Damn it! Rachel threw her head back and laughed at my latest attempt. You've lived in the cottage for 5 winters. How have you managed not to freeze to death? I struggled to free the axe from the log. Your piece of shit philandering ex-husband always did this for me. Rachel snorted into her wine glass. At least he was good for something. I'm pretty sure he was just coming around in hopes of catching me with another woman. He's even stupider than I believed if he thought that would happen. I stuck my tongue out at her again, but annoyance finally gave me the strength to chop through the log. Rachel cleared her throat and took on that I need something and I'm embarrassed to ask tone she'd perfected. Speaking of my stupid ex-husband leaving me in a lurch. Oh God, what's he done now? It's more his absence that's the problem. The kids want to go load up on pumpkins this weekend, and I really need help carrying them. Want to be the kids' favorite aunt? I grunted as I repositioned the log. I'm already their favorite aunt. Anyway, it's only September. Why do they need pumpkins? Saturday is October 1st. That's still too early for pumpkins. It's never too early for Lily to have pumpkins, Rachel said. I dropped the axe and spent several minutes wheezing to catch my breath. You see this pathetic display I'm putting on, right? Why do you think I can carry a bunch of pumpkins? She smiled and rushed forward, holding out the glass of wine. Good point. But the kids don't know you're a failed lesbian. They think you're a superstar lesbian who can carry twice the pumpkins their father can. And you're setting me up to disappoint them. Rachel shrugged. Better they're disillusioned now than wait until they're teenagers. I threw my gloves at her and took a long sip of wine. It occurred to me that this was bribery wine. I shrugged because at least it was an effective bribe. Fine, but you're buying me one of those Amish sourdough donuts and a hot apple cider. Rachel hopped happily and leaned over to kiss my cheek. Thanks, Nikki. I'll sneak in something to spike your apple cider with. You'll need it.
I love their banter. That's so great. And I love how much we're getting to know the character. Thank you, Tagan. All right. Last but of course not least is Karis.
Hi, thank you. We're reading from A Degree to Die For, and I am fudging a tiny bit. I'm reading from chapter 2, but it's the first chapter for Sergeant Adriana Kent, and it's told from the point of view of Claire Sawyer, who was the main character in With a Minor in Murder, the first book in this series. Your ass is mine, Sawyer. Claire Sawyer sighed as she turned around and faced her latest hopeful jailer. For the third time since she had stepped foot in the University of Washington's campus police station, she handed him the doctor's note she had been holding at the ready like a shield. You don't have to sound so gleeful, Landry. We're supposed to be friends. We are, Derek Landry said. He had been the first officer she met when she initially came to the department as a lateral, and one of the first people here that she had considered an ally. Usually we are, he added, but there's a beach in Hawaii calling my name, and I want those extra vacation days and the cash Kent's offering for your capture. Claire shook her head. Her sergeant must have upped the ante after she caught Claire on campus a week ago. She had only been walking casually around the dorms at night, and it was just sheer coincidence that she had been in the right place to break up a fight on the lawn in front of Willow Hall. She hadn't even been in uniform. Still, Kent had overreacted with a vengeance, and the resulting lecture, delivered loudly in front of the dorm, had caused quite a scene. Even the two squabbling students had forgotten why they had been fighting and banded together to cheer Kent on. And although there had originally only been extra vacation days to the officer who captured Claire sneaking back to campus, Kent had apparently added drinking money to the incentive package. Read the note, Claire said. I'm fully cleared for duty, so Hawaii is going to have to exist without you a while longer. Hold these while I check this out, Derek said, handing her his pair of handcuffs as he scanned the paper. In fact, go ahead and put them on. I'll uncuff you if this is legit. Claire put the cuffs in her pocket in case he decided the note looked like a forgery and wanted to chain her up in a holding cell while he investigated further. He scanned the paper and held it out to Claire with a rueful grin. Looks like you're officially back, damn it, he said. No hard feelings, right? Can I have those handcuffs back? Claire snatched the paper out of his hand, then pulled out the cuffs and let them dangle from one finger. I should keep these. Tell Kent you left them out somewhere and Libby got hold of them. Maybe she'll give me those extra vacation days. You wouldn't dare. Derek actually looked worried as he grabbed for the cuffs, and Claire wondered if Kent had offered a similar bribe to anyone who caught Libby impersonating an officer and launching some sort of investigation. Claire couldn't hide her smile at that thought. Good luck to anyone who tried to cash in on that bribe. Libby was a force to be reckoned with, and Claire was secretly relieved that the rest of the department might be helping to keep an eye on her. Claire had already discovered a study guide for taking the detective's test hidden among Libby's architecture books. She hadn't mentioned to Libby that she would need to have experience as an officer first, because then she'd be applying for the police academy, or bypassing that route altogether and setting up shop as a private investigator. She'd be a great one too, with her intelligence and logic, but more than anything, Claire wanted to keep Libby safe, and being a professor was much less dangerous than Claire's line of work. Well, usually at least, not lately. Derek snapped his cuffs onto his duty belt. See you in turnout, he said. Glad to have you back. Yeah, right, Claire scoffed, but she smiled as she turned toward Kent's office. She was glad to be back too. Or she would be as soon as she made it past Kent. Claire walked down the hall with its warm wood paneling that was covered with photos of past department chiefs, award plaques with lists of honorees, and bulletin boards full of notices about upcoming meetings and items for sale by campus officers. The homey, comfortable feel was a contrast to the more steel and glass look of the public access foyer, and completely at odds with Kent's office. Claire saw her through the open door, sitting at a desk that was piled with paperwork and an incongruous yellow mug with a hand-painted smiley face on it. Everything else in here was work-related, from the framed service awards and certificates on the walls to the shelves with their tidy rows of procedural manuals. Claire didn't need to look closely at them to know they were in strict numerical order. Adriana Kent was just as tidy and ordered as their small office, aside from the messy stacks of paper and file folders on the desk in front of her. Her dark brown hair was neat and short, with a few gray strands that Claire figured were the result of annoyance at her subordinates rather than age. Her uniform was starched and creased until it looked as if it could walk around the department and issue orders without Kent inside it if necessary. She was filling out a form with aggressively blocky printing, and Claire hesitated before knocking on the door, reluctant to disturb her when she was. Make it easy for me, Sawyer, Kent said without looking up. Just keep hovering in my doorway until I finish this paragraph, and then I'll arrest you. I don't need the vacation days, but it'll give me great personal satisfaction to throw you in a holding cell with last night's drunks. I have a note, Claire said, sounding in her mind ridiculously like a student offering proof that she had permission to leave class and use the bathroom. Kent looked up, her hazel eyes surprisingly warm and large, when one might expect to see chips of ice blue instead. You expect me to read it from here? She asked. Come in, Sawyer. Claire stepped inside the office and handed her sergeant the note, pulling her arm back as quickly as she could without making it obvious. Kent would likely be less DIY with the handcuffs than Derek had been, and Claire had a feeling she'd be attached by her wrist to the arm of Kent's chair before she even saw her sergeant move. She took a step back and leaned casually against the door jamb. Yes, she was perfectly at ease, not scared of Kent at all. Kent looked briefly at the note, then placed it on top of a pile of papers near her left elbow. She rubbed the bridge of her nose before glancing back in Claire's direction. What, are you on break right now? We're not paying you to lounge around, so get back to work. Kent returned her attention to the work in front of her, but not quickly enough to hide her smile from Claire. Really, she muttered, I'd have thought a month off would be enough R&R for you, but apparently it wasn't. Claire grinned, feeling a weight rise off her heart as she left the office and headed back toward the building's entrance. The first time she had left Kent's office, barely over 2 months ago, she had been much less enthusiastic about this job. She had been worried over her rash departure from Seattle PD and uncertain about her future as an officer. She paused in the hallway. Now, such a short time later, she felt as if she had just come home.
Wonderful. I love that. It's such a great transition from your first book to your second book. And I love meeting Kent that way. Your descriptions are so strong and so visual. Thank you for that. I'll invite all of our authors back. We've got about 10-15 minutes to do a couple of questions. So I've got some that are kind of targeted, but certainly welcome anyone who would like to add to them. So I'll start with Jessie and this kind of setup of an enemies to lovers. I'd love to know in your first chapter, how do you kind of establish the groundwork for romantic tension between Nancy and Sam and really kind of lean into setting us up for the long run?
Sure. So I wanted to make it very clear that they are at odds and don't like each other all that much, based on just these assumptions. Sam is rich and is in the tabloids, and so Nancy has this very clear idea of who she is. And then Sam thinks like, oh, this is just a stuffy historian and I want nothing to do with this. And they're also competing to buy this lighthouse. So they have this automatic tension, but I wanted to make sure that they weren't such jerks to each other that people just put the book down and are like, forget it. So I wanted to put a little bit of humor in there, a little bit of teasing and flirting. Even though Nancy rejects Sam right away, there's at least that moment of connection where they're kind of teasing each other. And she says, don't think this means I like you. And Sam's like, oh no, I hope not. Please don't. So that was kind of what I was trying to do with that first chapter.
Ooh. Yeah, anyone else want to jump in? Feel free to kind of just let me know on enemies to lovers if you have them in this book or in any others that that you have comments on in the first chapter, how you manage that.
I wish I wrote
I've done that in the past, and it's a lot of fun. I think like Jessie got to do, right? You get to have them kind of banter in that way that is going to turn into sexy banter later. So it's a lot of fun to do those. Yeah,
totally. Sandra, did you have something to add?
I was just gonna say I wish I was better at it or even capable of it, because I feel like I want everyone to like each other right away. Like even in my personal life, like if somebody comes at me with like negative energy, I'm like, wait, we can be friends still. So I'm always impressed and enjoy that sort of tension. So I'm glad people can do it. So thank you.
Yeah. I remember with my first book, it's an enemies to lovers, and one of the things I have in there is just kind of the bigger thing that is more important than their hatred for each other, kind of being set up. Awesome. Sandra, I'll toss the next one to you. I noticed in your book, I read the first little bit of it, and in the first couple pages, you introduce us to all 5 of the members that were having the dialogue in the scene that you read. And I was interested in what aspects you decided to pull out and introduce to us immediately? And what did you want to kind of hold back so we learn over time?
I think I don't know that I would recommend having 5 characters introduced in your first chapter. I think what I try to do whenever I introduce a character, especially if I usually write first person, so I get into the head of the character who's telling the story at that moment, and I try and think about what would this person say if they were to walk me through like a friend barbecue or a family barbecue, or what would I notice about these individuals, because they're all friends, they've all known each other for at least a few months, if not a year or longer, and so um they're not going to be strangers to each other, but for all intents and purposes, they're sort of a stranger to me. And so I just let, in this case, the first perspective was Arturo. I just let him sort of walk me through, and I was like, okay, this is what they're wearing. This guy obviously has a lot of energy. This guy is kind of a stick in the mud, and obviously that's the hot one, you know. So I just try and, like, as if we're walking through a barbecue or like a family, like they invited me over for like the Super Bowl or something, and they're like, this is so and so and so and so, and then here's just what you know. And that's like this initial setup. So and then everything else, I'm a person who will ask sort of deeper questions once you meet me anyway, so I let that come as the characters reveal themselves.
Totally. Love that. Anyone else have a lot of characters that you introduce and kind of, or even just your two, what aspects you really try to pull out at the very beginning?
I'm just really impressed that Sander can keep that many characters straight. I always have like 3 people in my books because I just can't keep them straight. So good on you for that.
Yeah, introducing 5 in the first chapter is impressive.
I wish it ended there. There's at least more who show up more consistently later, so.
Yeah, I feel like I always have to explain why my character has no friends that I'm introducing. Love it. All right, my next question is for Tagan. So your protagonist, Nikki, is described as bumbling and an awkward mess. How did you approach capturing kind of that unique voice in the first chapter? We obviously heard it, but I'd love to know kind of what challenges you faced in bringing her to life.
Yeah, so I actually think that Nikki was one of the easier characters for me to write because I love awkward, bumbling messes. Those are my favorite people. I think honestly, I think all of us are a little bit of a mess. We just, you don't see that from most people all the time. But I like people who don't take themselves too seriously. That's generally my favorite kind of person. And so that's one of the things you get to see about Nikki. And actually, when I first envisioned her as a character, this scene kind of came instantly into my head because it just kind of shows everything about her. It's like how sometimes she fails at things, but she keeps trying and she tries really hard, and she's loyal and loving and a good friend and family member and sister. And so you get to see all that and hopefully laugh a little bit because I laughed a lot writing it. So yeah.
Definitely. Do the rest of you, especially in your first chapter, are there ways that you have characters fit a certain personality type that you really like in others or see in yourselves?
I wouldn't say it's something that I like or see in myself, but I definitely set Sam up as like the spoiled rich girl, which she is at the beginning of the book. And so I think that was important to kind of get that right off the bat. You learn a little bit more about Nancy as you go along, but with Sam, she definitely has that vibe of spoiled and very rich and kind of gets whatever she wants. I hope that's not me. Definitely not the rich part.
Sander, it looked like you had something to add as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I try to rely on how other people are reacting to the character. So I think with in this case, Arturo is coming up with this plan, and everyone seems to be aware that this is what he does. And they're like, okay, you're the plan man, but we need you to think it out, And so I try and rely on, at least I think in all of my first chapters, the main character is is either interacting with a group or talking to somebody, and there's that natural like reaction to the way they're explaining themselves. And I think that can tell you a lot, like, oh, okay, everyone's used to this about this person, or that's new, sort of that counter reaction for them. So
yeah, totally. And Karis, I think that you've got such a strong personality around Kent with the organized, with the, so much that her outfit could go on patrol for her. How was that to write?
It was fun. I like to try to add something that will make her appealing too. So, I mean, when she smiles because Claire is back, and from the last book, we know that the reason she's been so determined to keep her away from work is because she was really worried about what happened to her. And so I like to introduce something that makes them, even if they're kind of hard to read at first, something that makes them appealing and makes you see the softness in them and the part that you're going to be rooting for.
Totally. Yeah. And actually, my next question is also for you, which is, being that this is a sequel and you're integrating old characters and new characters, it seems like that would be something that would be a delicate balance. Can you share what challenges you faced, especially in the first couple chapters, when incorporating the perspectives of both your new pair of characters and your old pair of characters?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite parts, is to be able to not just let these characters go. I know I said this before, and to be able to bring them back. And one of the challenges is to make sure that they're now a supporting role. And even though Claire starts this one, it really is Kent and Tig's story. And so to have them kind of show up a little bit, but then they're not the main characters, and that's kind of a challenge for me. But it's nice with the mysteries because they're so compressed in time, and the mystery is solved pretty quickly. And so the relationship is kind of developed in this intense situation that's short. And now I get a chance to, a couple months later, show the characters in a little more of a normal situation and how their relationship is developed, even though they're not front and center anymore. But it lets the romance be on it at a little more realistic, a relatable pace, even though it started out quicker in the main book. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, definitely. I think that can definitely be a really hard aspect when you're writing intrigue, suspense, action, fantasy, where they came together in a very heightened moment. And so being able to show, is that going to last? I'd love to know from everyone else as well. Again, feel free to give me a little raise so I know to call on you, since Zoom can have some delays. But how have you handled in the past, especially if it happened in your current book, making it clear that this is something that can last? Yeah, Sander.
So the other main character in this book is Thomas, and he is introduced in a previous book. He's introduced in Speed of Slow Changes, which is his brother's romance. And so his brother makes appearances, and so does the main romantic interest from that. And so I think that the balance for me becomes not continuing to gush over past characters. So I'm like, look how cute they turned out. So I think that's a hard thing to do, but it helps that you're now seeing those characters from an outside perspective as well. So it's the other romance through the eyes of Thomas, the character in this one, and I think that helps keep me grounded. But I think that it's nice to see that progression through different stories, or in their world, time continues, and they get to continue as well. So.
Totally. Awesome. Well, we are at time. I know that there was one question in the question and answer that was specifically addressed to Jesse. I don't think anybody else can see that, so just wanted to give Jesse a moment to highlight your answer about how you ended up co-writing a book with CF.
Yeah, so as I wrote back to Tristan, but I've been hounding Friz to write with me for a couple of years now. She loves historical fiction. And so I just really wanted to do something with her because she's such an amazing writer. And so we finally found a story that really worked about these two lighthouses. Her story takes place during World War II, and it's in the Nazi occupation of Denmark, and a lighthouse that kind of brings these two characters together. And then I have the lighthouse, obviously, that is being part of a bidding process for new ownership. So it ended up working out really well. And if you have not read anything by Frizz, please check it out, because she's a wonderful writer.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you to all of our panelists. We really appreciated hearing your readings. I'm very excited to pick up your stories and read more, and excited to have shared this conversation with you. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to our audience who joined us for this, and we'll see you at the next session in 8 minutes. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.